Hello, I'm Darren Magee, and today's topic comes from a question asking, do narcissists ever feel regret? Regret for their actions, for their behaviour? Well, the short answer is yes, narcissistic people do feel regret, but not necessarily in the ways or for the reasons you might imagine. So, in this video, I'll outline how and why they experience regret, the different ways they experience it, and give some examples of how they typically react. So, if you find this topic to be interesting, please consider subscribing. But to begin with, to put things into a context, narcissistic personality is largely based on fantasy and delusion, and those delusions tend to be very fragile. What we see are deeply ingrained and long-term patterns of behaviours and traits, such as an inflated sense of superiority, there's a huge sense of entitlement, being highly disagreeable, needing constant admiration. There is also a lack of empathy for others. But they believe themselves to be perfect, special, and flawless, which generally means they think they can never do or say anything wrong. So when their actions conflict with their self-image, or an outcome isn't what they believe they deserve, narcissists might experience cognitive dissonance, which can lead to feelings of regret. However, the regret is more about the discomfort of the dissonance, rather than an understanding of any wrongdoing. When narcissists experience regret, it's often superficial and self-centered, rather than due to a sense of remorse. Their lack of empathy and focus on themselves means they're less likely to feel regret for the chaos and emotional harm they cause others. Now, that being said, sometimes they do, but even then, it's usually short-lived. Their maladaptive defense mechanisms don't allow them to feel it for long, which is why we often see blame shifting, temper tantrums, anything at all to avoid accountability. Their inability to fully understand or care about other people's feelings limits their capacity for genuine remorse, and it often shapes what they do next, which is why we often see them trying to reconcile their behaviour with how they want to be seen. So the emotional experience of regret is more about the inconvenience or negative consequences they face personally, rather than about anything they may have caused. But they can express regret. Now, sometimes it's only really because they think it will somehow benefit them. For instance, narcissistic people place a very high value on their public image, so if their actions lead to damage to their reputation, well, they might express regret as a way to mitigate the harm to themselves and try to restore their image. They might offer apologies and show regret if they believe it will help them to manipulate others into forgiving them or thinking better of them. Or there can be times when there's a half-hearted, maybe even a sarcastic attempt to mitigate damage. In fact, the common apology partners often hear are things like, "I don't know what I've done to hurt you, but I'll always love you." So the expression of regret is insincere and aimed at achieving a desired outcome rather than stemming from genuine remorse. They can show regret in situations where it could lead to a tactical advantage, such as avoiding punishment or gaining sympathy, but again, it's often a calculated move rather than a heartfelt response. Now, another example could be if their actions lead to some kind of personal loss or failure. For instance, being highly disagreeable, they might ignore other people's advice, believing they know best. And they pursue a course of action which leaves them worse off somehow. So yes, they do regret their actions, but it's more focused on the negative impact on themselves rather than regretting they didn't listen to the advice and the guidance. They might actually even blame or attack those who did warn them, say things like, "You should have told me," even though they did. Next, narcissists can regret missed opportunities that could have maybe enhanced their status, power, or their success. This could be situations where they may have been able to impress someone who could have benefited them somehow, but they messed it up. And this type of regret is more about what they failed to gain rather than what they did wrong. But they don't hold that feeling for long though. There's usually someone else to blame for their loss. Then there can be regret over the ending of a relationship. Now, if someone has left them, there can be regret that the supply of attention and validation is no longer available, rather than how their behaviour caused the ending of it. However, if they ended the relationship, there can still be regret over the loss of supply. But there can also be regret over what they consider to be effort and sacrifice they put into the early stages of the relationship for someone who was clearly flawed and not good enough. Cases like this, they could feel as if they were hard done by. Lastly, there can be temporary feelings of regret that can be both fleeting and situational. Once the immediate issue is resolved or forgotten, their feelings of regret quickly dissipate. For instance, they may do something they know will have consequences, and they're terrified of what might happen if they're found out. And here the regret would be more associated with feelings of panic over perceived consequences. However, once the issue passes, or no one says anything or even notices, the feelings of regret pass just as quickly as they came. And they can feel relief, but they don't really learn anything. They just go back to business as usual. So there are just some of the ways narcissistic people experience regret. But how do they normally react? Well, as previously mentioned, there can be attempts to show regret, but only as a strategic move to try and save face. But if you know them well enough, you know it comes across as disingenuous. There can be regret and disappointment when things don't work out the way they would hoped, but it's never in themselves. For instance, it was the speed limit's fault for being too low whenever they were caught speeding. They didn't get the job because the interview panel were intimidated by their greatness. No one will give them what they want, meet their unreasonable demands, because there's some kind of conspiracy against them. It's always about how things affect them, rather than their actions or their part in it. Next, there can be over-exaggerated reactions. Someone points out their errors or their wrongdoing, they might respond with outrage, aggression, righteous indignation. Or they could exaggerate their remorse. They just want the world to end right now because they can't live with themselves. They have failed so badly, everybody must hate them. But as soon as the other person backs down, reassures them, or maybe just stops bringing it up, they just go back to doing what they do. The exaggerated reactions are aimed at taking the focus away from their actions and shifting it elsewhere. But there can also be overcompensating. Now, when they're overcompensating, they're really pretending to have no regrets. For instance, if they're in a new relationship, well, there can be lots of pictures and posts on social media about how much happier they are. But even if they have no new source of supply, they could still be posting about how much happier they are alone, how much better off they are alone without that horrible nasty ex of theirs. You know, the one who dumped them for their muppetry. But remember, the regret only comes with the consequences they face, so they try to avoid the consequences. Now, another common reaction is if a narcissistic person does or says something hurtful to someone, then they perform an act of kindness or generosity for them. And as far as they're concerned, the hurtful act has been undone. The matter is now closed, so there's no need for regret. But they typically keep doing the same things over and over again, cleansing their conscience each and every time they do or say something nice afterwards. And they can become agitated and defensive when others keep bringing up the impact of their ongoing bad behaviour, which is why people often hear things like, "I'm trying really hard to make this work, and you keep bringing up the past." The thing with narcissism is, the more chances they're given, the less they regret. And lastly, if a narcissistic person tells you they regret meeting you, going out with you, marrying you, or whatever, believe them, because they do. Because by that point, maybe you know who they are, what they are, and you're done with it. So they do regret it, but not because of anything they did, because that would require a little introspection, a little bit of self-reflection, and having to accept responsibility, and that might bring up too much shame for them. So to avoid that shame, they'll just dump it all on you. So in summary, while narcissists can feel regret, it's typically driven by self-interest and a desire to maintain their self-image and avoid negative consequences. It's not because of remorse for their actions. And how they express regret is often superficial, self-centered, and strategically motivated. What we often see are maladaptive defense mechanisms trying to protect their very fragile sense of self against reality. The reality of their own flaws, errors, fallibility. The reality that maybe they're just not as entitled as they believe they are. And when they do experience regret, it tends to be as something bad that has happened to them, rather than something they're responsible for. In many cases, it's almost like they're just innocent bystanders in their own lives. So that's a brief outline of how narcissistic people experience regret and how they often react. Now, as always, if there's anything I've missed, please feel free to use the comments section. There are some interesting conversations start from these videos. But if you find this topic to be interesting, please consider subscribing, and until next time, thanks for watching.